An editorial in the Seattle Times calls for local and state governments to re-examine growth management in light of the Oso landslide. San Diego's terrain is far different from Washington State's, but we face our own issues of erosion, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. Here with more on the issue is SDSU Geology Professor Emeritus Pat Abbott. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Pat, what do we know about the cause of the, what do we know, I should say, about the cause of the Oso mudslide?
Well, this is a very famous area for landslides. When you look at air photos, you see it's landslide on top of landslide on top of landslide. So in a broad sense, there's no surprise. It's just the surprise is it happened that day it did.
Well, certainly we've heard studies that say that they predicted the area was prone to landslides. As you said, there was a history of landslides in the area. You can see from the aerial photos, but houses were built there. People continued to live there. What does this tell us about the politics along with the science-based predictions of natural disasters and public policy?
Well, it's the same thing we face with earthquakes down here. We can tell you what the Rose Canyon Fault is going to do, but we tell you, well, it might not happen for 100 years. So how are you going to make people rebuild buildings or move? You know what I mean? Since we don't know the when, it's hard to put demands on people. And of course, these are a lot of folks who want to live out in a rural area. It's an unincorporated area without a lot of government regulations and so forth. They're not people who are looking for direction as well. So it's a very difficult situation. It's a people dynamics thing.
Do you think, though, that the warnings that scientists make about natural disasters, whether it be landslides or earthquakes, are taken seriously by politicians?
I think warnings are taken seriously if they have an immediate time on it. If they say a hurricane's coming ashore or something, then that gets a lot more attention than saying a landslide or an earthquake's going to come up some year in the future.
When a natural disaster like this strikes, of course, we wonder if something similar could happen here where we live. It's a natural reaction. And I'm wondering if the hillsides and the landscape here in San Diego is different, or could we have a similar landslide?
Well, luckily we could not have what happened in Washington. Those were very, very young sediments. That area is glaciated lots of times. You take an ice dam over an area, have a lake there, and then you have some gooey clays come in and some loose sands. The glacier goes away, river cuts through the lake sediment. So these are real soft sediments. We could walk up and pull them off with our hand and squeeze them. We don't have that sort of thing here. Now, we do have clays in older rocks, 45-million-year-old rocks, that expand and contract with water and do slide downhill. Think back about the Soledad Mountain Road landslide there in 2007. That's kind of an idea of what we have. We have ones that move slow and destroy property. We don't have those ones in Washington that go so fast and kill people.
Well, let's talk about that Mount Soledad landslide. I know there were lots of homes evacuated. Several homes were damaged. Several were lost. We have a prediction of an El Nino coming up this next year. Does that make that area and other areas of San Diego at risk for a landslide?
Well, the correlation between landslides and heavy rainfalls is very strong. And for Washington, it was the Pineapple Express, all that subtropical moisture that came up there. When we have seen the most of our landslides here in San Diego, I think back to the early 80s when it was a strong El Nino. And for me, it's not just El Nino coming, but if we're talking about ones where we're more or less doubling the annual rainfall, that is supersaturating the soils. That's making it easier for gravity to do its work. And I'm sure if this is a strong El Nino, we'll see landslides around town.
So if rain is one possible trigger, would earthquakes also be a trigger?
Oh, definitely. If you want worst case scenario, that would be take an El Nino, put in 20 inches of rain, and then have an earthquake on that supersaturated soil. Then we would really have a lot of things break loose. But I still wouldn't expect any deaths. Just a lot of property damage.
A lot of property damage. And is that because of the soil content and how we're laid up with the different layers of rock and clay?
Ours are more older rocks. What you saw up at Washington, the thing that their rescuers are going through, looking through that debris, that wasn't a landslide. That was sediment that was so saturated with water that instead of sediment holding water, it turned into a fluid and flowed. Ours is still going to be water within rocks, and rocks don't deform that fast.
What would you like to see our local government do as far as to be better prepare the citizens here for a landslide or a natural disaster?
Well, we actually are doing a lot. I mean, we have a lot of good agencies working on things. And a lot of these are those pesky things when people go to build a house or remodel and all these rules and regulations and all. Well, some of those are where you're reassessing the land, you're trying to build in concert with nature. So as messy as some of those things can be, the intent is to prevent these kinds of disasters.
Well, Pat Abbott, always a pleasure learning from you. Thanks so much.
Good to be here.